So thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon for our little presentation for the Tune In to Tune Up series. Today's presentation is going to be on research project management. I'll be your presenter today. My name is Michaela Stangier. I'm a research contracts officer with the Office of Research Partnerships and Innovation. And then also joining me here today for our question and answer period is Raymond Deschamps, who is a senior advisor to the Vice President of Research. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump on in here to our agenda. So pretty quick agenda here today. So I'm going to begin the session here by giving you a brief overview of the Office of Research Services and the Office of Research Partnerships and Innovation, and our teams and kind of how they work together. I'll discuss how we support you and our faculty members in their research. Give you a brief overview of research project management in general, including some project requirements that are standard to most projects, including things like ethics, indirect costs, intellectual property, supply management services and facility management, and other project supports on campus. I'll briefly discuss contracts and legal requirements. We'll go over some best practices, and then there will be a little bit of time for questions at the end as well. If you are joining us on Zoom today, please feel free to pop your questions into the chat, and we will get to those at the end of the session, and I'll read them out loud, and we'll get you some answers. So our office is formally known as the research office. However, we do have two kind of sides of the house within our office these days. So the first half of the office is the Office of Research Services. So we recently have a new director named Juliana Sorrell, and she's the director of the Office of Research Services. Also on her team are two compliance specialists, Ara Steininger and Rashmi or Gogo Pandya, who oversee compliance in the areas of animal care, human ethics, and hazardous materials. Michelle Bytel is also on the team, and she leads the grants side of the house. So also on the grants team is Samira Said, who focuses on health research, Barb Flynn, who focuses on social sciences and humanities, and Liz Vanderlande, who focuses on natural sciences and engineering. So this team of research facilitators actively assists the faculty with the development of funding proposals and budgets for research projects. And they also identify tri-agency, national and international funding opportunities in alignment with research areas and strategic priorities on campus. So some of the key things that the Office of Research Services does is provide guidance with grant proofreading, budget preparation and submission. They also assist in grant and contract post-award reporting and regulatory observance. They facilitate some workshops for the campus community, mentorship programs, and internal review programs. And they obviously also identify some funding opportunities for our principal investigators. On the other side of the house, we have the Office of Research Partnerships and Innovation. This is led by our AVP of Research, Dr. Andrea Sturzik. And on the team is Andrew Doan, who is our Commercialization Officer, Victor Goodman, who is a Research Contracts Officer, myself, who is also a Research Contracts Officer, and Saurabh Kapoor, who is our new Research Partnerships Officer. So some of the things that this side of the house deals with is reviewing and negotiating and developing agreements like non-disclosure agreements, MOUs or memorandums of understanding, as well as just standard research contracts and agreements. We also work with researchers in identifying, protecting, and commercializing their intellectual property or technology that's developed throughout the project. We facilitate partnerships with industry players, including individuals, communities, governments, non-government organizations, and other academic research institutions and businesses. And for external agencies who are interested in partnering with the University of Regina or our researchers who are looking for assistance in finding an external research partner, we help to make those connections. So together, a couple things that we do are increasing awareness of and ensuring adherence to university policies, ethical research standards, and Canadian and international research-related and intellectual property laws and regulations. And we do all of this through our system known as Converis, which we use to track projects and to communicate. So just a more fleshed out review of the Office of Research Partnerships and Innovation team, which is my team. Obviously at the top, we have our Vice President of Research, Dr. Christopher Yost, followed by Dr. Andrea Sturzik in the Associate Vice President of Research role. Saurabh Kapoor, as I mentioned, is our Research Partnerships Officer. So he does a lot of those connections between our industry partners. And he's also responsible for our agreements related to engineering and the natural sciences. Victor Goodman, who's a Research Contracts Officer, deals with the contracts on the human research and social sciences side of things. And then myself, I am also a Research Contracts Officer dealing with my tax grants, data sharing, and material transfer agreements. Andrew Doan is our commercialization officer, and Fatima Darga is our senior advisor for business development of MyTax. So she is technically an employee of MyTax, but she does help our faculty members with their grant applications to MyTax. So how do we work to support you, our faculty members, in your research projects? There are a few key ways that we do this. And the first one is by providing knowledge on the requirements for research projects. We do this in a few ways. So number one is by relaying processes. So what we do for you is we help you identify the stakeholders of your project, and we help you figure out how to engage them. We help you determine the overall requirements for your project. We help you contact relevant departments and organizations who might be a useful partner or sponsor for you. And we help you figure out how and when to complete certain forms or applications, and including a list of standard timelines for these things. So we also help you with drafting proposals and budgets, and our grants team in particular are the experts at proposal and budget review. They help you draft and assess budgets and proposals as part of their regular business operations, so they are subject matter experts. They can help you decide what to include in your proposal, they can provide you with a template, and they can help you determine if your budget is reasonable and ways that it could be improved. We also provide you with some legal expertise. So every research project will have some kind of agreement or contract associated with it. So we will provide you with information on things like intellectual property ownership, your rights and obligations under a contract, insurance and indemnity, termination or transfer of a project, and so forth. So we're kind of the legalese experts in this area, and we can help you sort through some of that. And then finally, we also help you with ethics requirements. So as I mentioned earlier, we have two compliance officers in the Office of Research Services who can help you determine your responsibilities as a researcher when it comes to ethics. They can relay information about ethics specific processes and assist with a research ethics board submission if needed. Another key function of our offices are that we help facilitate research and industry connections and partnerships. So our offices are kind of the hub for any external agency or organization who is looking to engage in research projects. And so what we can do is we can help to connect our faculty members with those individuals, or vice versa. If those organizations come to us, we can help find members of our campus community who can assist them with what they're looking for. And then finally, our office will assist you with finding some funding opportunities. So this mainly involves grants like tri-agency grants like NSERC, for instance, and MyTax. I'm not going to touch too heavily on this though, just because we actually do have another presentation coming up on March 17th here related to grant facilitation overview. So if you have any questions on grants, I would encourage you to attend that session. Right, so how to start a project and how do you engage with our offices so that we can assist you with your research? So a principal investigator can engage the ORS and the ORPI at any time throughout the project. So if you're sitting in the meeting right now thinking to yourself, oh, I've been working on a project for a few weeks now, I'm just kind of getting all of my ducks in a row and everything sorted, I'll wait until things are a little more concrete to reach out to us. The sooner you advise us of a project, the better it will be. The reason for this is that we can tell you what is required up front, so that when you are ready to begin conducting your research, there's nothing holding you up. There's no waiting period. We're not waiting on any forms or submissions or contracts. You can just begin and do what you do best, which is learn and innovate. Also on that note, some processes like the ethics review, for example, can take 6 to 8 weeks to complete. So again, we just don't want you to be held up in your project by any of these steps. We want to advise you of them up front and kind of get everything in motion so that it's a smooth project when you are ready to begin. So there are a few ways that you can get in touch with us. So you can contact staff directly if you do know who you should be working with. So if it's Victor, if it's Andrew, if it's myself, you can go ahead and contact us directly. All of our contact information is also on the website. Or you can reach out to our general office email at research.services@uregina.ca. Another avenue for you, if you are just getting started and you're not entirely sure where to start or how to be directed, you can also reach out to our AVP of Research, Dr. Andrea Sturzik, just at avp.research@uregina.ca, and she'll get you where you need to go. All of our team members do communicate though, so if you do end up reaching out to the wrong person, we'll make sure to get you where you need to go. So research project management. So every research project is going to be a little bit different, and the requirements are going to vary slightly. However, there are just some basic steps that our office wants you to be aware of when you are embarking on a new project. So step one is to identify a research opportunity. So as I mentioned, there are many ways that a research opportunity can be identified. So we could be responding to an external grant or call for proposals. We could be connecting with an industry partner or sponsor on our side, or the ORPI could be seeking faculty members for a project that's brought to us by an external partner. So there's really no one way that a research project will start, but your second step, as soon as you have identified an opportunity that you would like to take part in, is to contact our office. So as I mentioned, contact information is available online, or you can reach out to our general office or our AVP of research for assistance finding where you need to go. Step 3 will be meeting requirements for the project. So at this stage, you should really be considering who your stakeholders are. So anyone who impacts the project or anyone who may be impacted by the project. This will help you determine what the requirements for your research project might be. Some of the standard requirements are listed here and below, and we'll go into them a little bit more, but they do include things like indirect costs, ethics review, intellectual property, supply management services and facilities management, and then other additional supports on campus. So jumping right into indirect costs. So a 2013 study by the Canadian Association of University Business Officers and the Canadian Association of University Administrators concluded that universities actually incur indirect costs at a rate of 40 to 60% of the direct costs of research. So some examples of these indirect costs are things like infrastructure and maintenance costs, environmental health and safety costs, and costs associated with meeting regulatory certification and requirements, as well as costs associated with providing key administrative and facility resources and other supports. So there are many different, so even if they may not be included in your direct budget, these costs are incurred by the university. And therefore, all research funding agreements must include an allowance for the university indirect cost recovery rate. All of this information is outlined in our research cost recovery policy. However, I'll let you know here today. So the minimum rate that the University of Regina has is 25% of direct costs. So wherever possible, this should actually be included with every line item of your budget rather than a 25% chunk just at the end there. But there are a few projects that the indirect cost recovery rate does not apply to. So the first one are tri-agency grants, as these funding agencies reimbursed its indirect costs of research through the Research Support Fund program. On programs like the New Frontiers and Research Fund and others that have a section for claiming indirect costs, they must be included. And also for research funding programs that have a specific published indirect cost rate that's applied to all Canadian universities, that will apply as opposed to our 25%. So any faculty member who does want an exemption from the indirect cost recovery rate must complete an exemptions to research cost recovery form. So this form is available on our website, and it must be signed by the principal investigator with accompanying signatures by the dean or director and submitted to our research office. Our offices will arrange for the Standing Research Cost Recovery Review Committee to review the waiver request and make a recommendation to our AVP of research. Another important consideration for projects are ethics. So some projects will require approval from the Research Ethics Board, or REB. And this includes projects that have anything to do with human participants or human biological materials, animals, or cannabis. So an REB review is required in advance of any research project involving these things. And approval for these projects must be obtained prior to data collection. So the REB actually exists to protect participants and researchers. They're meant to work with researchers and not against researchers, just to make sure that their research plan is ethically sound. And it's basically just meant to protect the dignity, rights, and welfare of any research participants and ensure that we're able to use the research results without barriers and that we're following any laws or regulations of the university, of our communities, or of our governments. So there are also a few exemptions from the Research Review Board, Ethics Review Board, including publicly available information, observation of people in public areas, and the secondary use of anonymous information. So all of these do not require a review by the Research Ethics Board. But if you would like more information on this specifically, we also have completed a presentation on submitting an application to the REB using Converis. That was filmed on February 24th, and the recording is available just at the same place that you signed up for this session. Another important consideration is intellectual property. So as we all know, intellectual property is a work or an invention that's a result of research. So whether that's a design, a manuscript, a new process, a new technology, anything which one has rights for, and which anything that someone has rights for and that they can apply for a patent, copyright, trademark, etc. for. So one of our jobs at the Office of Research Partnerships and Innovation is determining intellectual property. So we want to figure out who owns research results and the developed technologies or processes, who can publish these results. So as a university, obviously, one of our main objectives is to conduct and publish research results. So this is a really important consideration and something that we'll discuss with you at the onset of your project. There are basically three options for intellectual property ownership. The first is that the university owns the intellectual property. The second is that the sponsor or the partner organization will own the intellectual property. And the third is that intellectual property is shared. So research and developed technologies can also sometimes be commercialized, which is why IP ownership must be established. So we recently have added a commercialization officer to the ORPI team. His name is Andrew Doan, and he can assist you if you do have any questions about commercialization for your technologies.
Sorry to interrupt. Are you wanting to share a screen? Because we can't see any shared screen information.
Oh. If you wouldn't mind helping. You guys see the screen?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome, thank you. You got to see my beautiful face. Yeah. But this might be a little more helpful. So when it comes to procurement for research projects, some research projects actually require that materials are purchased from external vendors, as we all know. So this can include things like equipment, surveys, consulting services, things like that. But basically, supply management services must be engaged when it comes to procurement for research when purchases are over $5,000. So if you are, for instance, taking part in an engineering project and you're receiving a new piece of equipment that's over $5,000, you'll want to contact the supply management services office at the top of your project, and they'll help you out with that purchase. And in the same breath there, facilities management should also be engaged if there are going to be any space requirements. So if you do need a space within the university, you should definitely contact them at the onset too. And that way you're not being held up waiting for equipment to be purchased or waiting for a space to be made available for that equipment. So as I've just said there, involvement at the onset is ideal, and you can begin contacting supply management services by reaching out to purchase@uregina.ca. So there are also a few additional supports to be aware of when you are engaging on a research project. The first one is the Research Information and Technology Support, or RITS. So the Research IT Support Initiative provides support for all matters related to the use of computer and software infrastructure in research, including applications for funding, design, procurement, and administration of IT systems and application development. So some of the things that they can assist you with are software discovery and reuse. They can supervise research software development teams, advise and inform developers of best practices. They help with interinstitutional knowledge transfer. They can assist with outreach and communication, the use of Canada's digital research infrastructure, and writing grant applications which have a research software component. In addition to this, our library is also actually a wonderful resource for research project management for any issues related to data management. So some of the tasks that they can assist you with are organizing and naming your files, tracking different versions of your work, and considering who should have access to your data. right, so step 4 here. So step 4 is to obtain proper documentation for the project. So there are a few different things that you should be aware of, different forms, contracts, agreements, and so forth that need to be in place before a research project can begin. So I'll just go over a few of the main ones here. This includes things like grant administration forms, and the main one being the Funded Research Approval Form, or FRAF. The Funded Research Approval Form is for all external research. All external research funding must be reviewed and approved by our offices prior to the application for funds. So what your process would be as a researcher is to submit this form with your application to our offices by the internal application deadline for whatever it is you're applying to. If there is no stated internal deadline, this will just be 4 days prior to the posted external deadline. So your dean or department head can advise you of who should review your application and complete and sign this form. In addition to this, we have the release of research funds prior to the ethics review form. So this form is exactly what it sounds like. If you are working on a project involving humans, animals, or cannabis, you do need that ethics approval. However, there is a form here that you can fill out to release the research funds to do things like pay interns, for instance, prior to that ethics coming through, because as I mentioned, it can be a bit of a lengthy process. And then we also have a conflict of interest disclosure form for research projects. We also have some compliance forms, which our compliance team, ERA and GoGo, are the experts in these. So if you do need any assistance with your compliance or ethics forms, please do reach out to our Office of Research Services. There are also some grant forms that you should be aware of, including a research proposal template and a budget template, which are available online, as these are going to be important components to your project. There's also a disclosure of intellectual property form. And finally, there are contracts. So I'm going to go ahead and flip over here. So as you can see here, this is just an example of some of the contracts that we work on. It will be the job of the research contracts officer, so myself and Victor Goodman, to draft, negotiate, and obtain signatures on these kinds of agreements. So just briefly, I'll go over a few of the main ones here. So the sponsored research agreement is kind of the king of all of our agreements. It is for funds provided to the university for research, where all of the research will be completed by U of R staff. We also have a collaborative research agreement where two or more parties are contributing a meaningful effort to the project and funds are still coming to the university. A service agreement is when the U of R is providing a service to a partner. A funding agreement is used to transfer funds by a granting agency, and along that same breath, my tax agreements and alliance agreements are both granting agreements that would fall under this. We also have amendments to any agreement. So if there's ever a change to an original contract, like a change of date, change of work plan, additional funds are being received, anything like that, anything that modifies the existing agreement will complete an amendment. Subcontracts are also completed, so anything that's not included in the original agreement that then later must be put into writing would be considered a subcontract. We also have data sharing agreements, which are to share data between institutions or other partners. Material transfer agreement, exactly what it sounds like as well. It's to transfer materials. We have non-disclosure agreements, which are like confidentiality agreements to keep information either of the project sponsor confidential, the university's information confidential, or a mixture of both. We have interinstitutional agreements. So this is for projects between academic institutions, intellectual property agreements for the transfer of intellectual property, invoice agreements for the transfer of an agreement between institutions for grants one more time. We also have a memorandum of understanding, which basically just outlines a generally what is going to be contained in the research agreement. They're not legally binding, but it's a good idea to have just to make sure everybody's on the same page. We have gift agreements, which are completed by University Advancement and Communications for charitable gifts. We have purchase orders for making purchases and user agreements when things like facility access is required. So again, if you do have any questions about contracts or the type of contracts that you may need for your research project, reaching out to the Office of Research Partnerships and Innovation should be your first step. And myself and Victor Goodman are your go-to guys. So step 5 here. Step 5 will be once all of the contracts are signed, you've completed your ethics review, you have all of your ducks in a row administratively to begin your project. The next step will be to set up the FOPL for the research funds. So as we all know, the FOPL is like the account number. It's the fund where your research money will live. So this is the job of the ORPI. We will communicate with financial services and send them all of the required documentation in order to set up the fund for the project. Once that's been complete, you can start making payments out of that account. Step 6 is going to be to meet your contractual obligations. So this includes like reporting obligations, payment of interns, sharing any data or materials that have been outlined in an agreement, etc. And then finally, step 7 is to do what you do best and to conduct research. So research, learn, and innovate. So finally here, I'm just going to go over some best practices for research project management and dealing with our offices. The first is obviously going to be to contact the Office of Research Services and the Office of Research Partnerships and Innovation at the onset of the project. Again, we are going to be the quarterbacks to your football project. We're going to get you into the end zone. We'll help you figure out what you need to do and when you need to do it so that you can focus on what you do best. The second is to review relevant policies and forms. All of this is available on the University of Regina website, as you know, and we do have some research-related policies and some specific research forms that you can take a look through. You can familiarize yourself with those so you can have an idea of what you might be required before contacting our office. Another best practice is to spend some time determining the resource requirements for your project. So this includes financial, material, and human resources. Once you have an idea of the things that you may need, it may help to determine your next steps of the project as well. In addition to this, spend some time determining who your stakeholders are for the project, where stakeholders are anyone who can impact the project, like supply management services or RITS, for example, and anyone who may be impacted by the project. So like community participants, which may lead to an ethics review, for example. So engage your stakeholders early in the process. And finally, spend time thinking about what might get in the way of your successful project. So project risk management, and plan what you might do in response. It's better to be proactive rather than reactive. And with that, concludes the presentation here. Just before we do jump into any questions, I'll just remind you again who your best contacts are. So if you are looking to contact the Office of Research Services and the Office of Research Partnerships and Innovation, we do have that general office email at research.services@uregina.ca. If you are just looking to be directed, you don't have any idea where to start, you can also reach out to our AVP of Research, Dr. Andrea Sturzek, at avp.research@uregina.ca, and she'll help to direct you. You can contact myself as well. Again, my name is Michaela Stangier. I'm a Research Contracts Officer, and you can find my contact information just on the screen here or on the website. And then if you have any questions about research project management in general, you can contact Raymond Deschamps, who is here for our Q&A session as well. He's the senior advisor to the vice president, and his contact information is listed below. Otherwise, I will check out the chat here and we'll see if we have any questions. We do, yeah. Oh, just a question on the PowerPoint. Yeah. And again, sorry for the technical difficulties at the onset here. We will post this presentation and a recording will also be available. So I'm not sure if the recording will show the slideshow in its entirety, but you should be able to go through it and take another look at it and see if you have any questions. And again, if there are no questions here today, you can definitely reach out to me at any time and I'd be happy to assist.
Hi, can I jump in with a question?
Sure, yep, we'll go ahead and take that.
Thank you. I did post it in the chat, but there seems to be two associate vice presidents. I'm not sure who I chatted to there. My question is pretty particular. I I transferred funds and got approval for ethics, University of Regina approval a couple weeks ago. Now I'm putting together the advertisement to hire a research assistant, but I don't know. I'm a guest scholar with the Humanities Research Institute, and Charity Marsh is kind of helping me along, but I don't know how to access my funds, my SHIRK funding. So I want to advertise and hire a student, but I don't want to put the cart before the horse. And I need to buy some equipment. I need to hire a student in order to get going. So I just don't know what to do for a second, third.
Okay, and have you received word from financial services on what the FOPL for your project is? I'm assuming, yeah. Oh, you didn't get approval for your project, sorry.
I have ethics approval.
Okay.
But I didn't know about FRAF and FOPL.
Okay. So your next step, Raymond, if you have any answers here, you can totally jump in. But in that case, you're Annette, is that correct?
I'm a what?
What's your name, sorry?
Stacy.
Stacy. Oh yeah, Stacy. So in that case, Stacy, actually, I'm going to follow up with you just after this meeting here. I'm assuming your contact information is on the website there, but you can also just send me an email to first name dot last name. I'll just put it into the chat here.
Okay, I will email, and I'll CC Charity Marsh because she's kind of being my steward along the process. Thank you.
Great. Well, if there are no more questions, we'll go ahead and end the session here. But again, thank you everyone so much for your time here today to go over this brief overview on research project management. If anything does come up in the future, please don't hesitate to reach out. But otherwise, everybody have a wonderful day. Thank you again.